And Senator Graham says, why are we spending all of this money? And the answer is, we don't believe that children in America should go hungry. We don't believe that working people should be evicted from their apartments or lose their homes. We don't believe that in the midst of a pandemic, people should not be able to afford to go to a doctor. So making sure that people have those direct payments, yeah, we believe in that. We believe that if a family is struggling today through no fault of their own, having lost their income, yeah, we are going to get them a check for $1,400 and a family of four a check for $5,600.
So 7 Democrats voted against Bernie Sanders' $15 an hour minimum wage amendment to the COVID relief bill this morning. Those 7 Democrats are Joe Manchin, Sinema, Tester, Shaheen, Hassan, and Carper. And then we also had Independent King voting against Bernie Sanders' amendment. So we now also know something else, and that is that they never had the 50 votes in support of keeping the minimum wage in the COVID relief bill. We have these 7 Democratic senators plus Angus King, who is the independent that caucuses with the Democrats, that voted no on Bernie's amendment. So my guess is that they weren't there supporting it in the first place. So it is possible that the Democratic leadership knew this and didn't care and didn't lift a finger because they too did not want the $15 minimum wage in the COVID relief bill. Quite possible. That makes it easier for them to blame the parliamentarian, right? Then they can look like they're saying out loud, yes, we want the $15 minimum wage to be increased, but you know, it's the parliamentarian's fault. They can carry on doing that and it gives them cover. Or the other side of the equation is that the progressives weren't willing to do like the harder fight, which would have been to block the bill and say, no, not going to give you my support, not going to give you my vote, which is what Joe Manchin did, right? And that would have forced them to come back to the drawing table and renegotiate. But I'm guessing that didn't happen because Biden and Harris didn't support it. Either way, the point remains. If progressives don't start withholding their votes on some of these things, we're not going to make any leeway because this bill on its own will be filibustered. And if it's not part of a must-pass bill, it's never going to get off the ground. So uphill battle. The other part of this equation, too, is we still can have 6 House members also refuse to withhold their vote. I doubt that's going to happen. So it's dead. It's dead. And whether we blame guys like Joe Manchin and Biden or we blame progressives for not fighting harder and doing the tough stuff, it doesn't matter. The American public is the one that's going to end up losing because we cannot continue with the low wages that we have today. The income inequality is simply too severe. All right, now before we get deeper into what we're discussing here, the budget reconciliation process is important to understand, so let's discuss that a little bit. We had Republicans claiming that this was not the right way to go, that it shut them out of debate, that it shut them out of being part of the discussion about not having unity with them. But this is absolutely ridiculous. I think more than once we have seen Democrats try to reach across the aisle to get something done bipartisan on this. But the fact is they don't want to raise the $15 minimum wage, and neither does a big chunk of the Democrats. But the budget reconciliation process has been used by both parties in the past to get things done. It can only be used for bills relating to taxes and spending, which is why it's not used all the time. But it has been effectively used by both parties to do those things. Off the top of my head, the Trump tax bills was done in budget reconciliation. The George W. Bush, even as far back as then, also tax relief done, or tax cutting done in reconciliation. Barack Obama used the bill reconciliation to pass his ACA bill. So this is something both parties has used. It's not a new method. It's perfectly acceptable. It's just bantered about as bad by the other party when they don't want something done, and bantered about as good when they do want something done. All right, so things that might also be excluded from the reconciliation process are bills that would add more than 10 years to the deficit. So sometimes, like you saw with the Trump tax bills, the tax cut bills, you saw that it was a temporary thing, right? Well, this is why. The CBO determined that the deficit would be extended beyond 10 years. So it's a temporary, not permanent thing. So, but other than that, I mean, it can effectively be used with anything related to taxes and spending. So now we've heard a lot about the Byrd rule this week. That basically is a provision that allows a senator to pull something out of the bill if they find it to be extraneous. And it is the parliamentarian that gets to decide what is and isn't extraneous. However, we've already discussed this. The parliamentarian is an advisory role. They're not there to protect Robert's Rules of Order. They're there to do the bidding of leadership. So I can say without equivocation, if Biden, Harris, Pelosi, Schumer, if all of these folks really wanted that $15 minimum wage as part of the COVID relief bill, we wouldn't be seeing this happening. So that brings me to the next problem. Is the problem that we have a Joe Manchin problem, or is it a problem that we have a weak progressive problem? Well, look, I think we have both. Obviously, Joe Manchin is conservative. He might as well be a Republican and has been in the pockets of the fossil fuel industry for years. That's a given. But I would say at this point, the progressives need to knock it off and get a spine. If Joe Manchin comes out and says, I'm voting no on this, guess what? The progressives should do the same damn thing. They have given away their power time and time again because they have chosen not to use their power. Joe Biden must pass this COVID relief bill. It's a must-pass bill. There's no way to not pass it. So if all of these progressives got together and basically said, Joe, we're not going to vote yes on this bill unless you include this provision, he would be in trouble, wouldn't he? He needs those votes. There's more progressives in office than there is of Joe Manchins. Joe Manchin only has control and power because he's playing hardball and they're not. So I would implore at this point that the progressive members of Congress, whether they're in the Senate or the House of Representatives, they need to get a spine and they need to utilize their strength by being willing to say no and by being willing to put their foot down to get what they need at the end of the day. If they don't start doing this, they're going to be constantly controlled by the establishment Democrats and the corporate money. It's that simple. Now, part of Bernie's speech today, I wanted to point out and play this clip. Let's play this clip.
Using reconciliation, by the way, Mr. President, as you well know, not a new idea. When our Republican colleagues had the majority, they used reconciliation. What did they use it for? They used it for massive tax breaks for the rich. That's what they used reconciliation for. They used reconciliation in order to try to throw 32 million Americans off the Affordable Care Act, something that Trump was fervent about. And by one vote, Senator McCain, we prevented 32 million people from losing their health insurance through the reconciliation process. So our response is, you want unity? Well, you know what? We probably have more unity today in America around this package than anything that I can remember. Polls vary, 65, 70% of the American people understand the crisis we are facing. They want us to respond. This legislation is enormously popular, not just from progressives, not from moderates, but from Republicans as well, depending on the poll, 40, 50% more Republicans support it because they can't afford to pay their rent. They can't afford to go to the doctor. They understand that government has got to help. So the real question here, and President Biden has raised this issue, is we believe in unity. We believe in bringing people together. How does it happen that when 40, 50% of Republicans support this legislation, we can't get one vote from Republicans here? What's going on? And the answer is, I'm afraid that my Republican colleagues have moved so far to the right that they have lost contact with the needs of working families.
So I think Bernie is sort of taking a dig here at Biden and Harris. He is basically sort of calling them out about not wanting to get behind this idea of ruling over the parliamentarian. Harris could have very easily said, I overruled this, it's done. and then we wouldn't be in this position, right? But she chose not to do that. So there's a reason she chose not to do that. I think it's because they don't want the $15 minimum wage in the bill. But that's what happened. And then you had the press secretary making some claim about they would need the 60 votes. Well, that's not true. If Harris had overruled the parliamentarian, they don't even look at the filibuster. It's a non sequitur. It doesn't even come into position. And in fact, the only way it would come into position is if they needed the 60 votes to overturn Harris's decision. So it would be on the opposite side. So again, this is weakness on either the part of the progressives, or it's a clear indication that Biden and Harris don't want the $15 included in the COVID relief bill. And what about the criticism that some folks have put forth that it's up to the activists to come up with a plan and present the progressive elected officials with a plan? I think that's absolutely ridiculous. These elected officials were put into office to come up with their own plans and to make policy happen. Why aren't they meeting and coming up with plans in advance? For example, when Nancy Pelosi was running to become Speaker of the House again, why didn't they run another candidate? Where was the squad for that? They should have come up with a plan to put somebody more progressive in that pole position, and they should have come up with a way to make it happen and to fight it and to put their feet down. But they didn't do that. They just rolled over. It's just one more example, as far as I'm concerned, of them giving up their power. They're giving up their power before they even get out the door because they're not willing to fight.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.